Emdol ka ke mo fa seda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I'm Matterall. We're going to introduce ourselves with their primary interest in EVE, starting with Carneros.
Me, yes. Well, good morning or other time of day, everyone. I'm Carneros. I'm the CEO of a medium-sized nullsec SOV alliance called The Bastion. And we're out in Fountain. You should come by and say hello sometime if you find yourself near Fountain.
Elise?
Hello, I'm Elise Randolph. Very happy to be here, as always, because I'm always here. I do a whole bunch of stuff in EVE. Kind of been around forever. That's basically my whole thing. I play...
Oh, you got cut off there.
I play EVE and I know things. I was going off the Game of Thrones thing that we were doing here.
Yeah. Actually, when I first met Elise, I thought you were a blonde girl.
Yeah, I get that a lot, actually.
All right. And so our guest today in our little round table here, as we go through the Surgical Strike patch, let's introduce Exuki.
Hello. I'm Exuki. A bunch of you probably know me at this point because I'm on the show a lot, but I hail from Wormhole space, so wormholes and small to medium gang warfare is mostly the thing I'm most used to.
That's right. And also on the Council of Stellar Management, the player representatives to CCP.
That's true. So I know things about the patch that you don't, but we don't get to talk about those.
But we'll try not to bait you. Bait you to get those out of you. Okay, so also Pandorelica is with us. Pando, how's it going?
Hey, I'm Pando. I do larger fleet stuff, and I sometimes stream it too.
That's right. I did an interesting stream with CCP Rise. We'll probably bring that up during the show. And finally, we want to talk to Sutonia.
Thank you for joining us on camera too, Sutonia.
No problem. Everyone gets to see, how terrible I look. But I'm a solo small gang PvPer in WeForm Volta. I was on the previous CSM, which is where many people may know me from, as well as YouTube and Twitch.
Awesome. Three great guys for good insight into this new patch that's going to drop on Tuesday, April 15th. It's called Surgical Strike. And we have some information that came out in a dev blog that was released on the 7th. So we'll see what's coming, and we'll talk about how it can affect you. Carneros, you want to take us through this?
If you didn't notice, there was also a follow-up forum post the next day on the 8th by CCP Rise, and it comments a little bit about the Surgical Strike dev blog and adds a couple of small changes to it. The changes will take effect approximately 5 days later in a second patch. So there will be a little tweaking to it as they go, and the fun part about that was that we got to see their process of putting out a dev blog, listening to feedback from the players in a number of different settings. Some of them were just Discord conversations, some of them, Reddit or wherever, and then coming back, then having their own discussions internally for how they could fix it and improve it, and then coming back with an answer within 24 hours. Pretty impressive for any software company or any game company. But jumping into our document here, first of all, be aware that almost every ship in EVE is affected by this patch. If it's not a ship that fits changed, that's having its fittings changed or having its abilities changed, its enemies are getting buffed or nerfed in some way, and it's being affected indirectly. So everything's getting touched. There's nothing particularly surgical about this strike. It's a mass carpet bombing type of thing. It's super healthy, but because it is so broad, there will be something to annoy every different individual person in the game. Is that fair? I think so. Okay, so first of all, why don't we start with the biggest ships and work our way down? We'll just skip upwell structures, which are going to be affected, absolutely. But let's skip that and go down to capital ships, capitals and supercapitals. And for that, let's turn to our Supercapital fleet commander here on the team, Pandorelica from the Initiative. Tell us what they're doing to Titans and supercarriers and capital ships.
So first of all, I wouldn't describe myself as a Supercapital FC. I do have the roles. I could field them all that much, but I don't actually. But I like to hunt them, so I kind of know how to fight them a little bit. And I think with the changes coming, that's gonna be a little bit easier. It's not gonna be easy by any stretch of the imagination. But so the first thing, which is super important, which people have been asking for, is the removal of the support fighters from Supercaps. I mean, people have been asking for that to be removed entirely, that role, so not even on carriers. And the reason for that being is to have the distinct roles of caps, supercaps, being like DPS, killing each other basically, and then subcap role would be more the tackle part, right? So you control the grid a little bit with subcaps and have the tackle, which was missing previously. And the reason for that is the support fighters. And now they're getting removed from supers, so I see that's definitely an improvement. So now subcaps have maybe a little bit of an easier time getting on grids, committing to a fight against supers and titans without getting pinned down on that grid forever, because that's the harsh reality. If you fight those guys, there's sirens, there's dromies on your fleets, a couple of them are going to be tackled. So a lot of times what would happen then is that fight would never even start, right? So people wouldn't even dare to engage it in the first place because they fear they're going to be tackled, pinned down, and you can't really kill them in time, right? And that kind of also goes into the next change there, which is the extender and plate change. So supers and titans did have a massive bonus on the EHP they gain from fitting extenders and plates. They dialed that back a little bit. So now not only can subcaps maybe give it a shot and see what they can do, but also they might have it takes less time to kill a super, for example, right? Because the EHP is going to take a little bit of a hit. So the chances of actually having success and not risking your entire fleet getting pinned down are a little bit increased, which I like very much, right? Obviously, like I said earlier, I like to engage them.
And this goes back to like your chat with on your show, your FC chat with CCP Rise on the last one. His main message was, all of this patch is meant to do is to make it so when you go into a fight, it's less one-sided. Even the losing side has a chance at killing something. Is that right? Is that like a good summary?
I think for these particular changes, that's not what he meant. Like, I don't see that happen straight up in subs versus supers. Supers versus supers doesn't happen all that much at the moment anyway. It's going to be very rare still. I don't see that happen in the near future. I think what you referred to was more the resist change, right? So when you have less resists, the chance of people actually trading, even if you lose the fight long term, you will still get away and kill some stuff, right? So that's what he was talking about or referring to there, I believe. And
Keep going.
And another big change for the supers there is obviously the long range heavy fighters, the signature radius increase, which means explosion radius increase, which means smaller signatures will be harder to hit for long-range fighter bombers. And that's usually, those fighter bombs are usually the choice for supers, simply because you drop them and they have a decent range. They're going to apply right away. They might not apply perfectly, but if you bring enough, they're still going to kill a lot of subcaps very quickly. Now they're going to hit them not as well, so that increases the chance of subcaps giving it a shot even further. And that's another step in that direction. And then another change, sorry. Yeah.
If you've never flown a supercarrier, they've got 5 tubes that you can put fighters in, and you can choose what kind of fighters to put in. They got 2 types of heavy fighters, 2 types of light fighters, and they used to have support fighters. Actually, they still do until the Surgical Strike patch goes live on the 15th. So you have a maximum number of each type that you can put in. So you have to think each time, okay, I got 5 tubes. I can put in 3 heavy, up to 3 heavies, up to 3 lights, or up to 2 support. But I have to I can only get up to 5. So you do some jiggling in your mind, and you can change them out during the fight anytime you want. It's not fast, but it's not slow either. So keep going now.
Oh, I think there's just one thing that's worth mentioning here. The explosion radius increase to 50% effectively means that heavy fighters now apply 33% worse, but then they've increased the fighter bay from 3 to 4, which is a 33% DPS increase, ignoring the light fighter that you use. So in theory, your DPS is approximately the same, but you are losing that Drommy, so you can't amplify your own DPS with the Drommy. So in theory, if you actually have support on grid like a Vigil and Rapier, Hyenas, those kind of ships with webs or target painters, your super long-range fighter DPS is not actually going down that much, although there will be more of them. So there might be like higher APM requirements from super pilots, and it might be a bit easier to kill them.
And if you're shooting an upwell structure or a starbase like a POS or a Titan that's been tackled, you actually have more damage that you can apply than before this patch.
And that the reason for that is, I think they want to push supers and Titans. Titans they already did with the Horgun removal. They want to push them into that role of being a cap escalation, right? So if someone feels caps, that's their role. They want to kill those caps, and that's why they get the DPS back through that 4th heavy tube. And then also the short-range fighters get a speed increase, because a lot of people didn't even get any short-range fighters anymore into their supers, because the long-range ones would just apply just as well and stuff like this in most cases, right? Unless you want to jump in very quickly and nuke something super quick and then get out. Otherwise, you would always use the long-range fighters almost. But they get a speed boost now. So the short-range fighters might be a little bit more of a valid option.
I thought one of the big drawbacks between the heavy fighters, the close range options, is that they have to be in PDS range of structures, and some of them can't hit POS shields too well. Am I wrong there?
That's entirely true too, yeah. When it comes to structures, heavy fighters would be almost useless. Unless there's no PDS. But, most big structures do have a PDS, sadly. And then, so fighter bay increased. Wait, fighter bay increased for Aeon and Wyvern?
Yeah, if you're going to ask people to carry more heavy fighters, which are very big, I think they're 8,000 meters cubed. So you got to increase the fighter bay, or they won't really be able to change choices of fighters if that's all they can fit.
Yeah, it's a little thing, but people have been asking for that for a while too. I wasn't aware they actually put that in there too.
The Nyx and the Hell used to have more fighters than the Aeon and the Wyvern, right? Now they should be closer, if not close to the same.
Yeah.
Yep. And then next on the list is probably the most controversial change they put in this patch, or in this patch notes so far. The patch didn't hit yet. and that's the limitation of cap boosters to 1 per Fox auxiliary, right? So every fax only can have 1 cap booster, which then I believe overall it's going to be a good thing, but I'm very aware that especially for medium-sized groups, let's say low-sec groups like Snuff and so on, I know they like fielding a fax onto let's say a Fortizar that they're hitting and stuff to increase like to be able to work with their numbers more efficiently, because they don't need a massive Logi wing. They can just field 1 guy in a fax and he can do the Logi roll, like to like most of it at least. Now that's going to be way harder in certain situations. Same for Wormholers. There are some issues like Wormholers I'm concerned about, but like I wouldn't talk about that. I think with Exuki you can talk about that very well. But yeah, so that's probably the most controversial change on these patch notes.
Well, what do these changes mean for carriers? Are carriers now going to be used as tackle for super carriers? I mean, are they having a role change? What do you think this is going to do to carriers, bro?
Yeah, I think there's going to be more carriers on grid, 100%, especially when it comes to like home defense, umbrellas, and so on. They will field a good chunk of normal carriers on top of it. So they do have some tackle, they do have some webs with them. And it's not like you can just kill them easily. If there's faxes on field, they will be hard to kill. So you would have to kill the faxes first. But they change faxes now, so maybe we've got a better chance at killing those faxes now. So, let's see. Like, that's my opinion at least. Let's see how it works out. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's a positive change overall. Definitely.
And what about dreadnoughts? You haven't mentioned anything about dreadnoughts and titans yet. What do you think this does to dreadnoughts? P.S. You haven't mentioned the T1, the close range ammo buff.
Yeah, I mean the close range ammo buff. I think subcaps profit from that a lot, but then also Tech 2 dreads might be way more viable now. Like I can see that happen way more often now. Dread bombs, meaning like a group of 50 dreads, they can deal some real damage. Now that supers and titans have a little bit more less EHP, they do have less resists in total, right? So faxes are going to have a harder time repping again, so you need more faxes to effectively rep it up and stuff. So the number, the magic number where you would break a super even under faxes, no, you need less dreads to reach that number, and you might just trade way better. But then again, it's 15%. Is that worth fitting all your dreads Tech 2 with Tech 2 guns? How expensive are those Tech 2 guns, Is that ISK efficient, which is in a dread bomb scenario always what you would be looking for. I mean, dreads are insured, the guns are not though. So
Omek is answering in chat saying that he's already done the numbers, and DPS to ISK ratio, you're now better off using Tech 2 guns.
Yep, there you go. So, but then again, also, there's more of an incentive to fit your dreads a little bit more expensive, which I like a lot, right? It's not the as cheap as possible kind of approach that if someone fields 50 dreads and you get wiped out, then, the other side, they can loot some good stuff. It's not, it's not like, already replaced it, we got the insurance back, and it kind of feels a little bit more, feels right, I guess.
Yeah, that's a big part that a lot of people kind of forget about, is like being able to loot the field at the end is a pretty big boon after these capital fights, especially when we're talking about a situation where resources are going to be limited and rebalanced in the future.
Nice point.
So
by the way,
you guys think people are going to move away from PvE capitals now? So ratting supers, I think a few people I've seen like done some tests on Sissy, and it seems like the clear times are approximately the same, because you deal with the frigates a little slower because you have one less light fighter, but then you have that extra heavy fighter, so you get through the battleships a bit faster. So overall, it works out to be about the same. However, now I think a ratting hell with like a standard fit, like 2 capital large shield extenders, 2 A-type invols, a damage control, and 3 CDFEs is going from like 16 million EHP down to 9 million, assuming like no Nirvanas. So like I think most ratting supers lose about 45% of their EHP.
Yeah.
So effectively, you can kill them in like double the time, right? And if you're using Tech 2 dreadnoughts, which I think you get about 48% more DPS compared to T1, because you get Tech 2 guns do 20% more than a T1 base, and you get potentially 10% extra from the specialization skill. Then you get, I think, another 20% if you can use that Hail, Void, the close range Citadel torpedoes, as well as Conflagration. And then on top of that, there's 15% more on that. So if you can get away with like Tech 2 close range dreadnought ammo, like you can potentially kill someone, I think, in like 3 times the time as you were before if you catch a super.
1/3 the time.
Yeah, sorry, 1/3 of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean, I think people are going to do it, right? But it is definitely going to be risky business. Maybe instead of having a falcon just watching you, you're going to have a rapier nearby to light the cyno to bring in the umbrella to save you, and you can also paint up the rats. But that thing's also super susceptible.
I would argue, though, if you catch a redding super, it's very rare that there's going to be dreads involved at the moment. That might just increase now, because you can actually kill it with less dreads in that 5-minute cycle, which you would be aiming for. Right? You want to go in, siege 1 cycle, and get out. So at the moment, it's very rare that you see that actually happening.
I saw it yesterday. I spent about 2 hours in the Theta super umbrella for Imperium yesterday, just helping out. There was a ping at a time when I had nothing going on. So I logged in a Titan and a super carrier and joined the thing, and I went to every other rescue with each ship to go try to save people. And it was one every 10 minutes, all through the night. And they were dreadnoughts dropped on a hell. You can see them on the Delve kill boards from yesterday. They were not blingy fit. They were intended for suicide. If you go look at dreadnought contracts in public in Fountain in the Serpentis NPC pocket, you see plenty of dreadnoughts available for hostiles to bomb the locals.
And that's interesting, right? So it depends very much where you live, whether or not that's a viable strategy, right? So in Delve and Fountain, Tribute and Venal and Pureblind, those areas have NPC stations where you can store the dreads in, right? So you don't even have to put in a Citadel or any uphold structure. So those areas, it's way more risky. But if you're talking about in like drone lands, someone probably doesn't have a dread cache just lying around that they can easily access over there. So maybe the meta shifts a little bit to drone lands. Yeah, sure. Use your ratting L. That's fine.
We should get one thing clear. These bonuses apply to extra large ammo. There was a misinformation drop that hit TIS because we were really fast on the scene. And I think it was, I'll point fingers at Billy might have said, doesn't apply to XL, and we kind of had some people run with that, so we want to clear that up.
Classic Billy, you can't trust that guy.
He later corrected himself, but and he admitted it, or I think somebody admitted it for him. But the point is that if you were under the impression that the buffs didn't apply to XL ammo, they do. I think we're long past that point anyway.
Well, it's so.
We lost you. I can't hear you, Elise.
That's fine. I figured it out. My button pressing skills are getting weak. My boomer hands can't do it.
You don't have any boomer hands.
It's so hard. It's so hard to like differentiate one part of the patch from another. Sorry about that. Because everything is so intertwined, right? You're talking about EHP reduction, resist reduction, close range ammo like increased. So it's crazy. Like all of the little things are connected.
Yeah, and I think like overall, I said that before the show actually. Overall, the entire patch is perceived as very positive, but because there's so many things on this list and everything is getting it, there's always something every playstyle doesn't like as much. So a lot of people focus on the negative parts for their playstyle, and then it comes across as a little bit more negative than it actually is. I think if you ask everyone, like overall, what do you think? I think overall you'll get a good, like, positive response. And then they're going to say, but they don't like the fact change, or they don't like the resist because it might promote kiting over brawling, even though, you know, they want to promote brawling and stuff like this. So yeah, it's very broad.
Well, it's very important to eat your vegetables and lead a healthy lifestyle. And this is a patch about healthy lifestyle. And yeah, all of us would like to have cake, and there's no damn cake in this patch. But you know what? That's okay.
All right. And we can talk about predictions later on the phases of development that are happening with CCP, what the game direction is, and all that kind of stuff. But we really wanted to break down how this patch affects you and how you should consider it. There's a lot to unpack here. As Carneros was saying earlier, this affects everybody. It affects either your targets or it affects you out there. But let's talk about a big change that's happening. What's that?
How does it affect wormholes?
Exuki?
So the wormhole community has been one of the more vocal groups about some of these changes.
Vocal in what way? By the way, vocal in what way?
So I think some people are incorrectly reading into this and assuming that some of these changes were specifically targeted at wormhole space. The cap, the cap booster change, I think, is going to hit the hardest. And this is something that, you know, came up a lot when we'd be trying to touch on figuring out how to maneuver around some fax balancing. Is your wormhole space use case for faxes is generally very different than a lot of your case-based ones. And what I specifically mean by that is in wormhole space, when two fleets are going up against each other, you pretty much have to assume that your fax has no cap at all. Balgorns are generally a mainstay of every fleet that you see being fielded, such that you're, depending on exactly how it's fit, your fax is probably out of cap in under 2 minutes, which means that for it to have any value on the field, it needs to be using capacitor injectors constantly to run its local tank, its remote tank. And with the limitation of one, I think, you know, most of Wormhole Space looked and said, there's no way this will work. Period. You know, it's very early to say. I think there's potentially some people that are overreacting, but I do believe that we're probably going to see much lower fax usage in day-to-day brawling. And you know, the kind of places wormholers might have been throwing a fax around, you probably won't see them throwing a fax around anymore. I don't want to try to predict what the meta is going to shift to. But you know, your previous wormhole meta for your I'll call them Apex, your Apex, like big, organized, very expensive fleets throwing themselves at each other, was one fax, 2 dreads, and as many subs that fit. Maybe only 1 dread if they were using a battleship heavy comp. And it is unlikely that I think we're going to see those happening as much, because especially in conjunction with the EHP changes, faxes probably won't even survive as well versus the fleets they used to fight, especially not with these new cap injector limitations. So we'll see what that turns into. There's been a lot of people scrambling to say we're going to have to figure this out, but pausing to try to cough off mic, whether it worked or not, I don't know. But I think, you know, a very intended change of this entire patch was to crank up the ships exploding on both sides. the EHP changes were directly targeted at trying to make sure that when two fleets smash into each other, the likelihood that one of them wins with losing either no ships at all or maybe just one or two compared to them completely decimating the enemy fleet. That was something that they were specifically targeting. And so when we were looking at and trying to figure out, how do we lower the logi bar a little bit, this was an avenue that CCP was excited to experiment with because it's across the board. It touches all of EVE. It's impossible to say that my meta for this or that isn't getting impacted. I think time will tell if it's going to look good, but I think that the players have been asking and pounding on the table. EVE's stagnant. All the same ships are used. The meta's stale. So CCP said, here's a curveball. Everything's fucked up. Figure it out. And we'll see where that goes.
But this isn't so maybe this dovetails, if we want to be like very rose-colored glasses / silver lining people, it dovetails quite nicely into the previous like mineral nerf that happened in Wormhole space too, which made, correct me if I'm wrong here, or if I'm oversimplifying too much, but essentially it made capital production in Wormhole space much harder to do because minerals could no longer be locally sourced. So now that faxes are or at least wormholers are predicting that they'll use faxes less, but they will make faxes less. So it's a good change, right?
I'm not sure how many wormholers were actually locally sourcing their minerals in the first place. Speaking for my own group and a couple of the other groups that I feel like I know enough about, I think it's very unlikely that they were doing enough mining to actually be building their own caps as much as I know in our case, we just imported, DSTs of compressed ore, refined them on the spot and built them. So I don't know if the mineral changes are really getting, directly changing how anything like the minerals being here or not being here was probably unlikely to stop wormholers from buying what they wanted. Wormholers are not known for letting price stand in the way of whatever they want to be using anyway. That could change. I think a lot of people are expecting that ships may get a bit cheaper moving forward as we look into a meta where the likelihood that I'm bleeding ships in almost every fight is going up. But we'll see what that does.
Well, I tried to add some silver lining, but apparently
I'll tell you what, Elise, you're so like positive and cheerful that if I was in prison and in some cartel dungeon somewhere in Mexico and you came with a tin plate and black beans on it, I would actually be happy. I'd be happy to eat that meal.
Well, that's good, I guess. Yeah. Hopefully we never have to experience that hypothetical. But I will say, so Exuki is saying in Wormholes, a lot of people are saying, maybe this fax meta is all gone. From the people I've been talking to in like more medium scale fleets, and maybe Sutonia could expand on this a little bit better. But the people that are in medium scale fleets, the people we're talking between like 20 and 80, which is a weird indicator for medium, maybe 30 to 80. They use faxes as force multipliers, and oftentimes they only have one or two with them, right? So they use it as a form of escalation, like, oh, we're starting to bleed too much DPS in this battle. Let's bring in this fax. So then they bring in the fax like stabilizes the reps, and then the other side is forced to escalate. They're worried, at least in part, that level of escalation won't happen so much anymore. Do you think that's a fair thing to say?
Yeah, most likely. For those of you that don't actually know, I guess we should probably explain why fitting multiple cap injectors is really important on faxes. Azuki did kind of mention it before, but what you could do, especially with the Apostle and the Nazu, because they're armor tanked as opposed to shield tanked on the Minokawa and the Life, which are getting hit a bit harder with this patch, is you could just have like four heavy injectors, the battleship-sized ones. And even if you had like a Balgon sitting on, like tons of Balgon sitting on you at 0, and you had like absolutely 0 cap, if you timed your reps and the injector cycles correctly, like if you can set the modules to not auto-repeat, and like if you have like really good micromanagement, like flying a fax in this way is actually really skill-intensive. But you can effectively, I think you can like maintain like something like 60 to 70% of your like rep effectiveness, even while you have like absolutely zero cap and you've just got like tons of Balgons on you. So effectively what this means is that now faxes will be able to be countered out by, I think it's something like 3 Balgons can drain a fax in a few minutes now, as opposed to the fax just being able to effectively ignore them at only like losing a third of its efficiency or something like that.
But I guess the counterplay here is, and this is something that CCP Rise was chatting about to Pando before, is if you're on the other side, right? So if you're at the side where faxes get dropped on you all the time, let's say you're just about to kill that first ship, and then a fax comes in, spoils the whole thing. Now you've got no counterplay. Let's say you're in an area where you can't escalate, or you are unable to escalate because you don't have those resources. That felt awful. So like now you have a chance, or at least more of a chance, to get some blood as you go down. I think that's what the point is, but it does remove.
Like from Volta, very often we would take like 2 or 3 Balgons or 2 and 3 Lashaks together out of holes, and we even with like 10 legions and 50 DPS legions, like there are some faxes that we just couldn't break. If they if I think there's like a 2 bill apostle fit that you can do with just like 4 dead space harness, and it's like if the pilot is it just plays correctly, like they use the good micromanagement, you just can't kill it flat out, even with like all of the right tools that you can bring out of Thera.
So I guess like as Pando was saying earlier, it's a little bit of give and take, right? So certain things get worse, but certain things also get better. So it just everything gets jumbled up in there. It will be an interesting change to see how people adapt to it too, because these faxes, they really are force multipliers in all scales of PvP.
In my world, we use them almost entirely for rescuing tackled PvE ships. And so normally we only introduce them by jumping in, so they're low cap at the start. And, one of the challenges this brings up is we got to get them there faster now, because whatever target they're going out there to help save has less survivability and can be killed in a much shorter period of time. So we're going to have to get a lot faster if we're going to save anything. And then, if we can successfully save it, well, then we've had a positive outcome from our point of view, and then we could just worry about getting everything safe and docked up. From the hostile point of view, they had a better shot because they could go in. They still get to pick their target and their timing. That's completely up to them, and then they can move a lot faster than they could before, because they can damage it as a percentage much quicker than before. Anyway, we'll see. It's a race.
Right.
Yeah, that is, and I think this is something that we talked about with Villy earlier on the last week's show when the patch notes first came out. Nobody has any idea of exactly what it's going to look like. Like, people are theory crafting, and the theory crafters are going wild, and people are predicting what's going to happen. But until it actually goes live for a few months, we have no idea what's going to happen. EVE Online players generally like to have a little bit more foreknowledge of these changes before they hit. So having it only go for a week, it's kind of like a little bit of torture for a lot of people. But it's also exciting in the sense that EVE has always been about the unknown and exploring the unknown and trying to work with that. So having PvP on every scale be thrown this, as Exuki put it, this curveball, it's exciting. It's scary, but exciting, as EVE should be.
Right. Any last words there, Exuki?
Sure. So I think the only little thing that I would kind of just throw out there is I I think this will be in the long run a good step in the right direction for Eve. It's easy to get caught up on some of the small pieces and go, this ruins the game. I think CCP is continuing to work on iterating and going quicker and quicker. Hopefully people have started to see that. If you still don't, I think you will over the next couple of months. The feedback that everybody kind of throws up isn't always. It's easy to see sometimes that maybe you feel like it goes nowhere. I would point out that Surgical Strike was rolled out, and one day later we already had adjustments to it based on some things that the devs missed, or the CSM missed, or maybe we underestimated. And a lot of people are focusing on this part or that part. Just keep giving the feedback. I think that the game's going to keep taking steps in the right direction, and even if you're someone sitting there pouting saying my game is ruined, I would encourage people to go give it a try anyway in a week or 2 weeks when everything's out and you want to go give it a shot, because I think some people also it's easy to sitting in EFT or PIFA and just sit there thinking that the game's ruined because the numbers on my little spreadsheet calculator says that the game is ruined, but I think that the way the game also actually works out is rarely quite as straightforward as PIFA tells you.
All right. Well, we have a comment here. I'll just read it and see if it's too niche of a concern or if it's actually something to look at. This is from Eden Hawker, or Edic Hawker. With all of this wormhole meta talk, nobody has talked about those groups that live in wormholes with wormhole effects. For example, Pulsar benefits shield ships with fax changes impacting shield faxes more than armor faxes, because most mid slots are being used for tank. The changes affect those groups more than other groups that live in vanilla wormholes or armor effect bonus wormholes, such as
Wolf Royette.
Yeah, Wolf Royette.
I don't think they can tune for edge cases like a shield effects wormhole.
It's certainly very difficult. I think since 99% of the game doesn't have some of these wormhole effects, you kind of have to balance it based off of that. Because if you try to start including all of these different edge cases when you're doing game balance, it just becomes impossible. If you go, well, if we do that, it'll be great everywhere except for in this place where it's actually going to be super broken. I think CCP is generally okay with wormhole effects making things either terrible or super broken. There's plenty of existing instances that are super memey stuff that you can only pull off in wormhole systems that have these effects. It's a super valid point, and one that I would say was considered when I gave some feedback on some of these things, but it rarely translates into, okay, we'll change our position. I think in some cases CCP would almost rather also go and fine-tune the wormhole effects themselves if we determine that they're too broken, than trying to balance other things around them.
In other words, yeah, some stuff's going to be broken. Or
stuff always is,
can we say,
and will continue to be broken.
Can we say collateral damage? Is that too much?
We don't like that word around here, actually.
Okay. Anyway, good question there, Edic. All right. Go ahead, Carneros.
Why don't we go look at what this has done to subcap ships? Suetonia, can you take us through some of the subcapital changes?
Oh yeah, sure. So all Tech 1 battleships, which it also includes faction hulls, if you're confused, all of the Navy ships like the Megaphone Navy issue, as well as the pirate ships such as the Vindicator, are all getting a 10% increase to their base hit points and a 30% increase to scan resolution. And I believe the scan resolution part applies to all battleships, including Black Ops and Marauders now as of the update. So battleships are going to be a little more tanky, and combined with the resistance nerf, it means that battleships will lose resistances, but they'll still retain some EHP. which gives them a bit of an interesting balance compared to Tech 2 hulls.
And there are some battleships that have a neat little niche as well. So the Rogue, Rattlesnake, and Abaddon all have this built-in resist bonus that's tied to the ship itself, and that's not getting nerfed, right?
Yeah, so especially the Rattlesnake, I think, might be very effective after the change.
And then all battleships are being nerfed in the sense of replaceability, though, because it takes scarce minerals and a lot of them to build a battleship. Is that worth mentioning?
Yeah, that's probably worth mentioning. It's going to be harder to build them to mass produce them too, right? Because they're so bulky. They're 50k M3 each, so it's very inefficient to bring them in through a jump freighter. So generally, you have to build them locally. But since there's going to be a lot less minerals locally, they're going to be harder to produce. So not only will they get more expensive, but they'll also just be harder to keep supplied.
Just piping in real quick, noting I gotta run. Thanks everybody for the show, and if anyone has questions specifically for me, feel free to hit me up on Discord.
One question before you go: what is a Wolf Rayet?
The Wolf Rayet is a wormhole effect that is specifically focused on wormhole or armor. It gives a bonus to armor amount, a significant increase in damage to small weapons, and a reduced sig radius to all ships in system. Are the big three. So it's notorious for it has a penalty to shield resistances. So you can't fight effectively, at least in these systems with shield ships. Small ships deal immense damage, so frigate fleets are very good in there, or ships using frigate weapons. Rapid light missile launchers are notoriously memey in these systems, and the reduced sig radius means that you can pull off some stuff in here that you normally wouldn't. So Kikis are very good in these systems.
All right, you get to keep your Wormhole card. That was just a test.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
You passed. Just barely, but whatever.
That was expert. Okay, back to battleships for a moment. Are these going to become hugely popular, or what do you think is going to happen to the meta, Captain Sutonia?
Well, for small gang roaming, I think they are a little more attractive now with the 30% scan resolution. I'm not sure if the 10% HP buff is going to change too much to small gang roaming, but CCP also added the Frigate Escape Bay recently too, which is, kind of niche. It's more of like a utility bonus rather than a direct combat buff, but it'll be interesting to see if we see more battleships in the meta. It's also worth mentioning that battleships are slightly harder to bomb now, I believe, because CCP nerfed resistances by 20%, but they also nerfed the damage that each bomb does by 20%. And with the 10% increase to base HP, it probably means it's a bit harder to bomb battleships, and then battleships are probably pretty easy to bomb anyway in general. So I'm not sure if that's going to change too much there. And with the 50% bonus to rage torpedoes, which are fitted onto stealth bombers, there's probably going to be more stealth bombers around as well.
A lot of armchair fleet commanders and theory crafters, they go into PIFA, they change the settings to update it for the patch, and they mostly all come to the conclusion that hacks are going to be extremely strong once again in EVE Online. Plus, Elo Knight is back in Black Legion, so the Munin stocks are going through the roof. What do you think about that? Do you think the Munin and the hacks in general are going to be like the new... Well, I don't want to say new because it's already still pretty active. But
heavy assault cruiser for you beginners.
Yeah, with the resistance nerf, ships that have inherent resistance bonuses, like for example the Eagle has a 4% shield resistance bonus, as well as the Munin, which because of the Mimitar Tech 2 resistance profile that it has like a very good Omni resistance, and CCP hasn't actually nerfed those bonuses or like inherent Tech 2 resistances, so they're effectively getting a buff. It's worth mentioning that the Munin did get nerfed in this patch. It lost 5% damage and 5% optimal range, which effectively means you're going to need more to be able to alpha someone, which is probably a good change when you consider that EHP has been reduced in this patch overall. It means Munins will have to be a little bit closer as well if you want to retain like your DPS, which puts them in slightly more danger, or it's a bit easier to get under their guns. But overall, I actually think that the Munin is probably going to be about the same strength, if not stronger than it already was after the change, even though it did actually get a slight nerf in this patch.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think Munins are going to be just as popular after this. It's not that much of a change.
Yeah, you did mention earlier that CCP Rise, who's one of the devs working on these changes, these balance changes, said that he probably didn't nerf the Munin well enough.
Yeah,
Well,
I think you mentioned that, right?
You sometimes see them look at a category like heavy assault cruisers, and then there'll be some really popular models at the top, like Munin, and then some really, really unpopular options like, say, the Deimos. And sometimes they'll nerf the top ones and buff the bottom ones. Tell us what they did to buff the bottom ones in this patch.
Yeah, so I'll quickly mention that the Eagle, the Eagle was another really popular ship, that heavy assault cruiser that did get a nerf in this patch. It got slowed down slightly, which means it'll be slightly easier to like waterboard them and kill them. Eagles with afterburners were already quite slow. It was like pretty easy to actually like just stay on top of them and annihilate them if you caught them out. And with they received a power grid nerf. Although effectively what that means is a very popular Munin fit that I believe Test and Goons use is like 2 large shield extenders with a EM shield hardener and 2 involves with an afterburner. You basically just need to drop a mag stab for a power diagnostic now, which is like a 10% nerf to DPS. So it is relevant, but it's kind of like a tap on the shoulder, kind of like the Munin. It got a bit of a nerf, but then the fact that the Eagle has Tech 2 resistances and it has that shield resistance bonus per level, it's probably going to be about as strong as it was. And yeah, the Deimos, which was a pretty popular ship for like solo PvP or like maybe like 1 or 2 man gangs, but it didn't really see any use outside of that niche, really, outside of like a missile PvP or some guy taking it out to just roam into someone else's space. It got a damage buff from 5% per level to 7.5% per level, which is quite nice. And when you consider that if you're fitting blasters on your Deimos, you're also getting a 15% damage bonus on top of that if you can use a Void. And the power grid and CPU was also buffed, which could potentially be interesting. It might make it possible to do like rail Deimoses in fleets, but I honestly can't see it being used over the Eagle.
Are there other other heavy assault cruisers that should have gotten a buff or a nerf? Like Zealots. When's the last time you saw a Zealot fleet?
Oh, I think the Zealot is probably a bit of a dark horse right now because beams got buffed by 10%. The optimal beams got buffed by 10% recently, and the Zealot also got like a pretty substantial DPS boost in close range because it used to have no drones, and then it got 25 M3 of drones, which basically gave it like an extra 90 to 100 DPS on top of what it was doing if it was fighting in like drone control range. But I think people are probably still going to use Munis and Eagles, especially with like how armor works in like alpha doctrines. Pando and Elise are probably a bit more knowledgeable at me when it comes to like the Zealot in fleet context.
I think one of the main reasons why people tend to decide against Zealots is their speed too. Right? Munins, they have that strength. You can take the fight, and if stuff doesn't work out, you can just burn out of the bubble, swap off. So you get away with a lot of things. You might lose a couple of Munins, but in the end, you can still alpha stuff off the field. With the Zealots, The DPS is not overwhelming at range. Your damage kept to EM thermal. So if you bring zealots over and over again, people will start tanking against those resists. You are fairly slow, so you get pinned down, potentially losing an entire fleet of zealots. That's really not what you want to do. And then, as you said, it's armor on top of it. So on larger scale, it's it's a tough mix. On paper, they look decent, but I think people will still not run that. Like, it's not going to become a thing. But medium size, maybe. Yeah.
Let me ask about one more heavy assault cruiser. And that is, it's not one of the big four empires. It's the precursor one. People may forget that the Triglavians also have a heavy assault cruiser called an Ikitursa. What can you tell us about ramifications for the Ikitursa in this particular surgical strike patch?
Well, most people use Ikis for hunting with, like slightly lower numbers, and it basically got buffed, right? Because the capitals that have a EHP nerf, at least the Supercapitals do, and then it's effectively doing, approximately like 20-25% more damage, depending on, if people had resistance modules fitted. So overall, Ikis are going to be stronger because, the time they're going to do more effective DPS, and then you need less effective DPS to kill people.
The only one thing, though, about the Ikitursa is the only weapon type, close range ammo type, I should say, that doesn't get a boost. So the Ikitursa, it's not doing more damage with its weapon types anymore. Now it's just doing more compared to what it was doing because everyone's got fewer resists.
Yeah, thank God CCP didn't buff a cult, because otherwise things would have been like super crazy.
I see a Dung Tinkle in chat who is saying that the Kikimora should probably get a boost. So, he's on the CS.
That's not
that's a good.
That's smaller, but yeah.
Yeah, and there are two more cruisers that got specific changes in this patch, T3 cruisers. So the Loki has been very dominant among the Tech-3 cruisers for a very long time, and it's getting a bit of a nerf. So 3 of the bonuses that it gets on the projectile offensive subsystem have been reduced. I think it was 7.5% per level. Now they're reduced to 5% per level for optimal range fall off and tracking. So you have to be a bit closer. Tracking is nerfed too, which also, if you're closer, it's a bigger tracking nerf on top of that. And the power grid was nerfed on it as well. So a lot of the really popular low-key fleet fits now need to be changed around a little bit, especially with artillery. It's much harder to fit them.
And
how were those?
Question that hopefully you have some insight on. When the patch hit on Tuesday, when the patch notes hit on Tuesday, we were kind of going through the changes, and one thing stuck out to me that was incredibly bizarre, and it made me feel very dumb. So I hope you can provide some insight. The Legion got a massive power grid nerf. More so than the Eagle, which is a pretty strong hack, but the Legion's power grid nerf got reduced down to 625. What am I missing about Legions? Were they hidden like this super amazing ship, or did CCB suspect that they would be this super amazing ship? What's wrong with Legions?
Well, I mean, in Volta, we used them for a very long time. I think they are very strong. I mean,
so they're just
it's a Volta nerf.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of groups are starting to adopt Legions, though, right? Trigger Happy, I think, started using Legion Doctrine, and a few other smaller groups that can't get 100 Munins together. You can get 60 Legions, and then you can still fight the same level of heavy assault cruisers, especially since the Legion was pretty strong because you had about double the EHP of a hack. You don't have the assault damage control, but because the Legions that we were using in Volta, if you got a fairly decent abyssal plate on it, which wasn't super expensive, you could get 160k EHP in fleet. So it took 50-60 Munins to be able to alpha you if they were super close range, and then you had the TD on them as well as dual prop, so you could afterburner around, so Munins were very rarely hitting you for full DPS if they were losing close range ammo on you. So it was a very effective counter to Eagles and Munins.
Was it being abused? Was it were they didn't seem like they were that overrepresented in usage. We're trying to figure out a why.
Yeah, I'm not too sure why CCP specifically decided to nerf legions. I think it's fair to say that they were probably a little bit out of line. Although I think the Munin and the Eagle probably deserved to get nerfed more than the Legion did. And it seems like the Legion probably got nerfed the worst out of everything here.
Maybe it was because, and I'm just like spitballing here, but maybe it was just overshadowing the Zealot way too much. So they're like, okay, well, the Legion is just better than the Zealot in every way. Let's make it only better in 3 out of 4 ways or something like that.
Maybe they were worried about covert, tinker, fit, Legion logistics going through jump bridge. I don't know. I give up.
I'm just very happy to know that I wasn't the only one that was kind of confused by this.
Yeah, if we're placing bets, my bet is that when they made these nerfs, people would move to the Legion, so they were kind of working one step ahead. But
that's valid.
Yeah, the Proteus and the Tengu were quite far behind the Loki and the Legion too, right? So maybe it might not just be like trying to get the Zealot out. It might also be trying to get the Proteus and the Tengu out, which you don't see too much of anymore.
All right.
So Pando, what subcap changes are you excited about for your FCing yourself? Because we know you really actually get a lot more satisfaction out of FCing subcap ships than you do fleet capital ships. So tell us what you're looking forward to trying next week, or thinking about next week, or anything, something you think that's cool and bears additional investigation.
Well, I don't want to give it away, if I predict just say no, like what I'm looking at, might just keep the cards.
Say the opposite.
You're going to send out some surprise fleets, aren't you?
Well, I want to talk about one thing, but then again, that gives it away. So that's actually, but the Legion thing, I don't understand either. And battleships, I kind of look forward to maybe field more battleships, but at the same time, I still don't see that the changes push them. Like it's not going to be a game changer for battleships either. I do like Eagles and Munins being nerfed a bit, so it's going to be a little bit easier to engage those. So I look forward to that. But in general, I'm going to stick to Kikis for now, and keep your eyes open for like something bigger maybe in the next coming.
They say
week.
Keep your eyes on this space. In other words, you'll see what we do.
I'll make a prediction for Pando. I think the Rogue is back. I think that's it.
What is Rogue?
It's too
Rogue
battleship.
Rogue.
But the problem is still the same. I think, I talked about that with Rise 2. So I do think battleships are in a decent place, but not for how the game is right now. So let's assume you had way more players around, so everyone would have a neighbor they could fight. So you don't have that problem of moving those battleships. If that problem is removed, right, you only have to travel 10 jumps. More people would field battleships, right? So that's my problem with rocks. Yes, they look great and stuff, but have you ever moved a massive rock fleet from A to B when B is like 3 regions away? It's like,
I have.
No, I'm not doing it.
I have quite famously gotten a rogue fleet stuck in a wormhole, and the only escape was to kill each other to get us out because there was no mass for the exit.
Oh, wow. It's like a Donner party of rogues.
So to Pando's point, they are kind of hard to move around. They are a great platform, but you can't go through you can't take a Thera shortcut with a rogue fleet because you'll just end up collapsing the wormhole. So it has to be a fight that's kind of on your doorstep.
Correct. Yeah.
But they did make changes to the speed of battleships to move them along faster as they're moving around. And you also have these filaments. Not filaments. What are they called?
Needlejacks.
Needlejacks, yeah. Are they filaments? Is that what they're technically?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
I think there's needlejack filaments and there's regular filaments for abyssal dead space sites, and it's the same word. I don't know.
Let's jump over to, because we're running out of time here. What's in this patch for suicide, ganking, and high sec?
Oh, so there's so in case, let's just go through this quickly for new players. So CCP is buffing Tech 2 close range ammo for all of the close range weapons except for the Triglavian weapons. So that includes rocket launchers, heavy assault launchers, torpedoes, rapid torpedo launchers, citadel torpedo launchers, blasters, pulses, and all autocannon weapons. And suicide gankers very often they would use ships like Catalysts, Taloses, and stealth bombers fitted with either Void or Rage torpedoes to gank people really quick, effectively. And so it's going to be easier to suicide gank people after the patch if you're using stealth bombers or Void in Tech 2 weapons. So CCP posted an update saying that they are going to buff the hit points on freighters and jump freighters. So effectively, it will be harder or probably the same to gank jump freighters and freighters after this patch to keep things in line as what it is. And they are monitoring the situation, because even though they are buffing HP on freighters, but they're not changing HP overall on a lot of other ships, like incursion running ships or abyssal ships or just mining ships in general. So, if you're mining in a Procurer, it's going to be easier to gank you after this patch, and CCP are monitoring that. So hopefully maybe they'll make some future changes if it gets out of hand.
Let me point out, though, that the freighter and jump freighter EHP buff is not coming in the Surgical Strike patch. It's coming approximately 5 days later in a supplemental patch. So there's going to be a little vulnerability period in the middle where you're going to have to, I don't know, drive quick or something.
Maybe don't drive for a week because, or at least don't go through any 0.5s. Definitely. So Nyarja, that's a no. Yeah.
Don't put everything you own into a Orca and then autopilot it.
Yeah. I didn't know the pilot's name. He was moving a bunch of blueprints and accidentally got caught.
He was moving his life, and then his life got blown up.
Which happens, and people just, the cool thing is you can start over. Sometimes I want to be free of all my important assets. Not that this guy was, but sometimes I want to be free of my assets.
I want to in theory, but then I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
There's actually a few other ramifications of this this patch, right? So if you are an abyssal runner, or if you run missions or incursions or anything like that, be very cautious, because your ship, it's not getting that EHP buff like the freighters are. It can still die to suicide gankers, so be mindful of that. Otherwise, you might die. So that feels bad there. The EHP nerf
distances, right, too. So you'll also be easier to gank even without the close range ammo.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
And I will say that CCP Rise did mention that, there are a lot of ramifications to this resistance nerf. Like your NPCing setup is going to be different, right? Your abyssal running setup, it might not be viable anymore. Your burner mission running setup, it might not be viable anymore. Ooh. And they're keeping an eye on it. And as Carneros had mentioned earlier, we got like a change after just 1 day. So there will be some iteration, I'm sure. So don't be super panicky, but again, maybe check the math a little bit before you take a fit that was just barely surviving in whatever PvE environment you are using.
Well, I think that's why these balanced changes are both good and bad. One is they shake up the way that people have to problem solve in order to get the thing done they wanted to get done. The problem, or the side effect of that, is all the literature out there on how to do a thing is no longer relevant. So all the work that went into saying this is how you do a burner mission, for instance, that may not work anymore. And people don't usually go back and update stuff if they've left the game and stuff. So it makes it harder to kind of find ways of doing things.
My
But it also
incursion
gives you
sig,
like a
my incursion sig said, okay, no more Nidhoggers from now on. They just don't have the survivability anymore in Surgical Strike. So plan now. You've got enough time before we get lucky with another spawn. So train into something else.
But what I'm thinking, and this is kind of a serious thing, is that there's a kind of a passive building up of ISK, right? Like some people, they're satisfied with just making money, and it's a soothing thing. It's almost like an idle game where you sit there and you're just kind of like dropping quarters in a slot machine, and you don't really care if you win or lose. It's almost the meditation of doing it. There's something going on that's enough. And
You're not a PvPer.
Exactly.
PvPers do not have a gradual buildup of wealth in their account. That just happens. I had the experience this week on my main of going to buy a Tech 2 shield hardener and not having enough ISK in my wallet.
Yes.
So no.
No, I've lived in Eve poverty. I lived in Eve poverty for like a decade and then decided not to. But yeah, it is, if you're a PvP, you're constantly going through that wealth, but other people play this game differently, which is why I said exactly. They are satisfied to do that work, but that's not where you want to interrupt them. That's not where you want to make it harder for them. You want to make it harder for them when they do the mindset of, I'm going to possibly lose a ship, I'm going to fight. But if you're setting them back in areas where they're used to make money so they could do the thing, isn't that a frustration for people? Think about it. We'll talk about it next time.
Yeah.
All right.
There is one thing that we didn't really talk about too much, and that's about the Grease's Hunt event, which is going on right now. If there's nothing else you guys want to talk about with the patch, I can briefly talk about this.
Sure.
Go for it.
So the Hunt, it's kind of like an Easter kind of themed event, right? The Greases, they're the rabbits, so that's why they get it. Lore. So anyway, there are these events that are restricted to Tech 1 and Tech 2 destroyers. They're littered all over the place in high sec, wormhole space, null space. And there are two types. There's the Grease's Hunt, and then there's the Hunt Master's Outpost, which is like the harder one with better loot. Those are more often seen in Kaldari space and in Venal. So if you want kind of want to test yourself, go there. But I will say that they are quite tricky. Inside the site itself, there's the site with like 4 or 5 spawns of NPCs, and then there's a gate. To get through the gate, you need a key, and to get the key, you need to have tracked down one of these mysterious capsules that are all over the place. They're sitting at Celestials. And to find those, you have to add a regular capsule to your overview or to your filters. And they sit at Celestials, so you have to use your D-scanner to find them. It's very frustrating at first, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be A, better at using the D-scan, and B, you'll just get the hang of it. You'll get the feel for it. My suggestion for running these sites, get like 5 or 6 keys before you start running the sites, and then go run the sites as you want. All the rats do scram and they newt, so don't be caught off guard there. It's probably better to do the Huntsmaster sites in pairs. I personally like using a MJD destroyer with me because only the Kestrel scrams. I'm sure Sutoni would be proud of this. So that's the only thing that can stop your MJD. So if you kill the Kestrels first, then you can always MJD to safety if a bad guy comes. And that is where you get a variety of rewards. Most notably are the Hydra implant sets. The Hydra implant sets are the bonus to drone tracking, and I think also missile application and missile flight time. I could be wrong with that one though, because I haven't made a full set of the Hydra implants.
No, you're right. They affect flight time as well as missile application, explosion velocity, as well as drone tracking, optimal, and fall off.
Now, if you're flying around in nullsec, which I do on occasion, you'll see the beacons in space for these events, and you see it. It's obvious. Oh, okay, that's a Grease's the Hunt site. You know that. Does that also signify the systems where the eggs can be farmed, or are they in different systems, or every system, or any random system?
The eggs are anywhere at any celestial. They could be at a belt, they could be at a moon, they could be on a gate. So the eggs can be anywhere. The sites, I should point out the sites, if you do see the beacon in space, that means someone has tried to warp to it already to like activate it. So it could be a trap, but you can always just open up your scanner and it's whatever the green ones. I can't remember if they're signatures or anomalies. The green ones there, you'll see it. It'll just say, just like if you're looking for a sanctum, it'll say Grease's Hunt Master for the hard one and the Grease's Hunt for the easier one.
All right.
Oh, and as someone in the chat did remind me, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this. When you activate the gate, it uses the key whether or not you can go through it or not, which is very annoying. So if you were scrambled by rats and the gate opens and you're like, oh, I'll just use the gate. You can activate the gate. It'll say, oh, you can't go through this gate because you're scrambled. It'll consume your key and you won't be able to go through even after you kill all the rats. And if you're like me and you double click everything because you're just weird, it'll use 2 keys. So just be mindful of that. Don't lose all your keys at once.
I got it.
So I vote we go around the room and give people tips on how to prepare for surgical strike. How's that sound?
All right, but skip me.
All right, we're going to skip you. But think about it anyway. Think about it.
Okay, I will.
Here's what I suggest that you do to prepare. If you can fly a dreadnought, pull up your dreadnoughts and look at where they are and get them all ready, because dreadnoughts are fantastic in this new meta. So go and look at the fits of all your dreadnoughts. Check the fuel bay, get them ready. Check to see whether you have long range, short range, or HA weapons fitted. Look in your hangar and see what other sets you've got there. Look in your station hangar and see what you've got ready, and get them all, each one 3 sets. And in fact, if you've got good skills, get them all 6 sets, just in case the FC says, I want Tech 2 Haws, or I want Tech 1 Haws. Get it all ready. Better now than later. Make sure you've got plenty of ammo types in there and enough ammo. Get all your dreads ready. That would be what I would do between now and then.
All right.
I've got 2 pieces of advice, I guess. One's a good piece of advice from Fansui, what she was saying. If you're doing a PvE activity, maybe go down a level of what you were doing just until you feel like you have a mastery of it, and then go back to what you were doing before. So if you were running T5 abyssal sites, pop it down to 4 for a little bit, just to see if you still can optimize your playstyle a little bit better before going back to the 5s. My advice is buy a really fun blaster ship. I bought a polarized Navy Mega. I actually bought 6 of them as soon as the patch came out because I figured some of my friends might want to join me. They do like 2,500 DPS and have 100k, 110k EHP. It'll be fun. We're all going to die horribly. There's no mistake about that. But they will be doing a lot of DPS while they die.
Suetonia?
Sure. I'd say like there is a silver lining to everything, right? So even though if you're doing PvE, for example, your resistances are lower, if you're using close range weapons, so if you're doing like abyssal sights in, say, a Ham Cerberus or a Ham Sacrilege, you got a 50% damage boost while you're using the rage missiles. So what you can do is you can take like a ballistic control system off your fit, because now the DPS boost that you just got makes up for that while you're using the close range weapon, close range ammo, and then you can swap that out for a tanking mod, and then you can get back your old tank and your old DPS. So like remember to review your fit, and don't, like, whenever things are nerfed, don't don't be too upset about them, because it opens up new avenues, and the most creative players always will find a way to exploit the changes.
I do have a tip, but it's not necessarily surgical strike related. But if you have things that are sitting in asset safety in packages that you haven't unpacked yet, because you don't want to pay that fee and do it sooner rather than later, because fees for unpacking things are probably going to go up, if for no other reason, because the mineral prices to create the things are going up. Therefore, the price is going up. Therefore, your fees to get it out of storage are going to go up. So I did have a little tip that I will create a little video on that shows you how to, if you have a bunch of different asset safety pickups that you need to do, because you have to actually go to the station in order to get it out of asset safety. So you'll be doing some traveling if you have, over the years accumulated a lot of stuff in nullsec. Those stations were destroyed. Your stuff went to asset safety. And so you might have 5 to 10 different low-sec systems that you need to travel to in order to get your stuff out of that asset safety package. So I will show you how to basically find those packages quick, look at the contents, figure out if you want to destroy them, and then set up a route so that you could just do one big trip going around unpackaging everything. But bottom line, get your stuff out of asset safety sooner rather than later.
Pando, do you have anything, bro?
I guess so what we're doing is give tips for the patch, or what
Yeah.
Right, so I would say Python a lot, or whatever, if you do the ghost fitting, but don't focus too much on it. Undock and test it, see what works and what doesn't, and I'm pretty sure there's plenty of fun to be had by people, no matter what playstyle.
And I'll do one for Exuki, who had to leave early. Dock up your faxes and wormholes. That was semi.
I would like to disagree there. I think there's an opening. People would be surprised if you change your mindset on faxes a little bit. You can still do it. It's just different.
Nice.
All right. Okay, so that is the roundup, right? Are we done with that?
Yeah, I think we're done.
Cool, Carneros. Thanks for taking us through that. And do you guys have any you guys want about?
Sorry, you were breaking up. What?
Yeah, you were just roboting.
Do you guys have any news you want to talk about? Battles, movements. There was a tournament this weekend. I don't know if you caught it. There was a grudge match. It was really good. It came down to the last second, and some fancy piloting was displayed. I don't know if we can see that. Yeah, we have it queued. Can we actually play that video,
matching the
McLeod?
transversal as best he can and trying to stay in range and outside.
I think with volume.
I don't think he can.
Yeah, I think I put him on the spot. All right, we won't get the audio on it and stuff, but I'll just talk over it. As you can see, the battle comes down to the last second, but you can see pilots matching each other's transversal. In other words, flying alongside each other to shoot instead of crossing, which makes you take less damage because basically the cannon is hitting an object that's moving at an angle as opposed to moving flat or on the same plane. So you see stuff like that. You also see a really wicked ending here because one of the pilots, in order to survive, because it's an issue of milliseconds, right? And in order to survive, actually offlines one of his shields to make his sig radius go down, and that's how he avoids a little bit of damage that is enough to get him through, and he ends up destroying his enemy. That was a cool match, cool piloting, and it was a grudge match, which makes it even better. And that is all Eve SC, I believe, which we are now a sponsor of. So in order to keep them going, we've decided to sponsor them along with Olmeca Gold, who asked, and New Eden Trade, actually, I think. I think that's his name. So it was pretty cool. Yeah, and that's put together by DTM, and it is Eve CS. Check it out. I think it'll be next weekend as well. It's really exciting.
And where do they see these matches?
I think they actually have a Twitch channel. Thank you for asking. It is Eve_CS or -CS. There it is. Eve-CS.
Okay.
And the VODs are also on YouTube as well.
Thanks, Utonia, for putting it there. Eve-CS.
Right.
Well, that's all I have. Do you have anything, Carneros?
No, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Pando. Thank you, Sutonia. Thank you, Igzuki, even though you had to run off. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you to January for helping put the show together, and McLeod for running around like a headless chicken. We appreciate it. This show could not happen without McLeod.
I will say one thing really quickly before we head out. If you haven't checked out Pando's FC chat with CCP Rise, you absolutely should. You just need to listen to it. It's fantastic. It's great insight into how CCP is developing these patches and CCP Rise's mindset. It was just a fantastic listen, so make sure to check that out.
Also, if you think the tone of our show was too calm today, you might want to watch yesterday's The Meta Show, because that was not calm. It got going at a certain point.
We have published the last 3 Eve Pando FC chats today, so check those out on the Talking in Stations stream as well. Okay, thanks everybody for showing up today. That is all that we have time for this week. We will see you next time on Talking in Stations.